Okay, so very quickly up front, just to get the answers out for the why talk about this instead of various other things first, depending on which one goes up first. Initially, the first thing I wanted to put up, which maybe goes up first, maybe doesn't, wanted to have an episode about Gwimbly, which I wanted to do way back when that first came out in April. If you didn't catch that from the context clues in the Space Coast Coast to Coast episode, that's what was supposed to come out first. Then after that, had that in the can, halfway in the can. Then Roger Corman passed. Wanted to get a Roger Corman episode up. And the thing about Memoriam episodes is if they don't go up right away, you can't do just a quick and, hey, this happened, this is what it was sort of episode. If it goes up later, you want it to be good and in-depth, so putting some more work into that, going back, rewriting, adding, fleshing it out. And then this fucking thing happened and just really became something that I actually had a lot of thoughts on. In the midst of writing this, should I talk about Assassin's Creed? Do people even want to hear from me about that at this point? I don't even know, but maybe. Anyway, got to the Apple business, had a head full of thoughts, wrote them up, wrote this episode up, seemed like it was over. Then there was a Samsung response video. I'm sure more will develop on this, but I'm tired of waiting around and shuffling the schedule around when that means content isn't going up on the site, and yeah, so let's just fuck it, let's go, okay? See if you can tell where the rewrites came in on this one. So I guess I actually have to catch people with real lives up for this one, because some of the things that changed in the week or so this all went down is that this was supposed to be the big new ad campaign running all over TV for the iPad Pro tablet, and it instead became the iPad Pro commercial that no one who only sees commercials when they watch TV will apparently ever see because they put it up online first. And they got a massive ton of instant white-hot backlash and hate for it, like the kind of hate you usually don't get on the internet unless you put olive oil in coffee, or the wrong teeth on a CGI hedgehog, or a black guy in a video game, or a woman in a video game, or the wrong kind of currency in a video game, or the wrong review score to a video game. Really anything to a video game. Point is, if you actually have things to do during the day, this likely sounded like the kind of people are angry about something that their phone showed them that you probably correctly associate with things that don't actually matter, that people who don't actually matter complain about, went about your day, and then, before you got to see it yourself and make up your own mind, Apple had already gone, well, fuck it, we clearly screwed the pooch on this one, because if we, Apple, the people who invented selling quasi-bespoke twee bohemian millennial grey bullshit as a lifestyle brand, are now failing to read the room when it comes to terminally online social media addicts, well, folks, we done fucked up on a movie studios agreeing to Zack Snyder cinematic universe deals before the first movie comes out scale. And it is weird that happened twice. And yeah, they yanked the whole thing down and apologized for it. So anyway, what this was all about was this commercial spot. I'm probably not going to be able to just play the whole thing, since Apple are kind of bastards who will probably Content ID claim this shit. And unlike them, I do need the money, so let's see how much mini clippage we get away with. Where we see all these different items stacked up, all of them either old-timey or cumbersome or vintage in some way, musical instruments, big stand-up piano, arcade cabinet, tube TV, some rubber ball toy versions of emojis, an Angry Bird statue, jars of paint, a clay sculpture, books, a wooden artist model, vinyl records. It's already kind of confused, right? Like, some of these are tools, some of them are toys, some of them are for making art, some of them are media of art, some of them are outdated technology, others are components of each other. They're all from different misaligned periods. There's not really much narrative in place here. Emojis and Angry Birds are graphics from digital apps. The original base versions of them don't have a physical form. The balls and the plastic, I think, toy stand-up version of Red are all based on that, so they're here representing the Angry Birds video game and texting apps, or are they literally toys based on apps in and of themselves? Anyway, that's not what bothered people, really. What bothered people is that the storyline of the ad is that all this stuff is inside a giant fucking industrial press that comes down and just crushes it all. In super close-up, look at all the stuff get crushed, wow, because various industrial materials look cool when they break and explode under pressure, and bored attention issue kids watch clips of this online, so the algorithm decided that's popular now vision, and then the press comes back up, and instead of a big mess, we see, oh hey, I guess it made the new iPad because the selling point is that it's the thinnest iPad, and maybe, I guess also vaguely suggesting you don't need all that clunky old stuff because the iPad can do all that instead. Cool?
Don't you usually laugh at everything?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
So, cards on the table, I just think this is a really bad commercial. I just think it's bad. It's bad marketing, it communicates the subject poorly. It wouldn't make me want to buy Apple products, even if I was someone who ever bought Apple products, where I had the option to buy anything else. Just on neutral, cold business of making motion picture content for the purpose of getting people to purchase stuff substance, I think it's bad marketing, and I will explain why presently, but also, a little more personally up front, It upsets me. I find this to be an upsetting 68 seconds of filmmaking. It's painful to look at. That in and of itself is not necessarily criticism, necessarily. Making something upsetting, saddening, horrific, painful to watch, want to look away is not only valid filmmaking, and not only can be good filmmaking, it's an essential part of filmmaking storytelling, of making good, compelling art of any kind. You can't make a horror movie, or even just a scary part of any other movie, have any suspense or any real stakes, or make any bad guy genuinely threatening, for example. You can't do any of that if you're not capable or willing to use the tools of visual narrative to strike people's consciousness in a place that makes them go, no, stop, bad, get that away from me, I don't want to see that. Make it go away. And I know that sounds obvious, but it's really not, because people think scaring people is easy, and it isn't. And that's why there's so many bad horror movies, and so many horror movies, period. It's not actually that easy to shock, horrify people in a meaningful way, because not everyone is good at actually understanding what makes they themselves frightened, sad, uneasy, uncomfortable, and at articulating and relating to those feelings in other people. So a lot of lesser horror films end up being stuff that the filmmaker thinks will scare or gross out or get a jump out, of somebody else, but they're removed from it, or think it's kind of cool, actually, not to name any names, Terrifier. Anyway, I know that sounds like a general tangent, but stick with me here. When I first saw this Apple ad, very soon after it went up, before I'd seen much other reaction to it, my first thought was, this can't be the real thing. Someone edited this, right? Because this is so horrible. Forget that it's narratively bad as a commercial. We'll get to that. I just found it so viscerally upsetting in such a specific way. I immediately understood what it was I was reacting to, and what I soon discovered a lot of other people were reacting to. Basically, the overriding visual metaphor, whether intended or not, of violently obliterating and graphic, look at this, celebratory detail akin to ritualistically sacrificing objects of symbolic significance to the hands-on creation of distinct personal artistic expressions in order to replace it with this cold slab of technological singularism, was just grotesque. It feels bad. It makes people who make things feel bad. And I don't think that's wrong or weird in some way. I think it's a pretty normal feeling, a normal reaction, expected. People form memories around things and stuff, sentimental objects, heirlooms, artifacts, favorite toys, favorite beloved artwork, things that belong to a loved one they've lost, things that remind them of points in their past. And I'm just not someone who thinks of that as wrong, or tries to tell someone, hey, it's just stuff, don't be materialistic, because damn, stuff matters. Things matter. Whatever Apple wanted the response to this to be, it was instead from everyone from well-known and or well-followed musicians, artists, writers, etc. to just small-time creators posting horrified responses by the thousands, all in the vein of, oh god, no, that's the exact piano my grandma taught me to play on, or what the fuck, that's a perfectly good one of those. What did the metronome do, for shit's sake? But it also jumped immediately to bigger existential takes. Screenwriter Colby Day called it perfect ad for the moment. Big lumbering machinery slowly crushes the life, humanity, color, and personality out of everything. Patton Oswalt described it depicting the absolute annihilation of all artistic, tactile human experience. Perfectly encapsulates the insight that people think technology is killing everything we ever found joy in, and then presents that as a good thing. That was Katie Deaton from the Wall Street Journal. Songwriter Crispin Hunt said, crushing a piano, trumpet, and guitar evokes the same primal, horrific sacrilege as watching books burn. Human rights lawyer Qasim Rashid called it a trillion-dollar company bragging about destroying everything unique and beautiful humanity ever made and replacing it with a mindless screen with an absurd $1,300 price tag. Even the Surfs jumped in, echoing more or less where I was with, did no one stop and think that maybe destroying everyone's childhood as a flex would make people see you as fundamentally evil?
What is wrong with you people? Huh?
And that is about where I came down on it. Nobody who found this horrifying had to explain to me why they did. I think it's one of the worst things I've ever seen. If it was part of a conceptual horror film of some kind, it'd be genius. But in terms of what it is and what it's meant to do, it's everything I despise about Apple, present-day tech culture, and a lot of modern web culture distilled into an accidental, perfect hate object. I hate this. I hate everything about this. If this ad were a person, I'd probably go to jail for speaking aloud the kind of harm I'd think about inflicting on it. The implicit symbolism it presents is the antithesis of everything I could ever possibly hold sacred, and if digital content were punchable, it'd be the most punchable commercial I've ever seen. Whatever the intent behind it was to convey about Apple's apparently very important new tablet, all I see is perfectly nice and good stuff being wrecked up for no reason, framed as though it's supposed to be a good thing, and it's just not to me. I despise the concept of that. Everything about it makes me viscerally angry.
If you destroy a history book, you cheat future generations out of knowledge of the past.
That's rather deep for a planet whose motto was, are you going to finish that sandwich?
Hey, I don't make fun of your stupid planet, Electoral College.
Returning to the ad itself, of course, because this was the internet meant that we got the spectacle of people who can grasp the concept of metaphor getting to argue these points of reaction with people who can't parse metaphor and also people who can, but pretend like they can't because it's a good way to bully people for the crime of having functioning human emotions, which here boils down to, no, actually, you just didn't understand it. The point isn't that things are being destroyed, it's about how technological advancement can make things smaller and more convenient. So all the art and creation tools are still there, they've been turned into a tablet. Now, since I'm a reasonable person, I'm willing to concede that this was probably the general concept that was meant to be conveyed by the Apple ad. Sure, that makes sense. The problem is it's not how it came off at all. And when you're advertising, how something comes off is really all that matters. The only point that a commercial has is a short story that makes you either want to buy something or like the brand or company more than you did when it started. And if that doesn't happen, it didn't work. And since nobody's complaint here was, I'm confused, but rather, I've been made sad and angry at the visuals you've placed in front of me, it's not because people didn't get it, it's because you did a bad job telling the story you wanted to tell, told a different story instead, and they did understand that one and just didn't like it. But the problem, the foundational problem here, isn't some kind of mystery. It's just bad filmmaking, bad cinematic storytelling choices, a lot of them, made over the course of producing, creating, and releasing the commercial, and all entirely explainable without some kind of esoteric layer of moral condemnation, although, also plenty of that. What's more, once again, while being reasonable and fair, I'll concede that even if the whole thing were executed correctly and conveyed what was presumably the more benign intended narrative, they still would have gotten some of these same complaints. The general theme of the ad itself is just bad on a conceptual level. I don't think there's a way you can do this concept of mimic those hydraulic press videos that went viral a year or two ago. I think it was like a couple from Finland or something, as an ad where art objects are getting compressed down into an Apple iPad and not have it seem like fun things are getting smashed and going away to some degree, and people don't like when fun things get smashed and go away in any context. Okay, as a similar example that no one even remembers happened, even though it was only 2 years ago. Yeah, so in 2022, Meta, aka Facebook, ran what might have been the least popular Super Bowl ad ever, and it was all about a Chuck E. Cheese-like restaurant shutting down and the animatronic band animals all being sold off and eventually going to a junkyard to get Jesus titty fucking Christ, tech industry, what the fuck is it with you in this specific visual? So yeah, the happy ending of that commercial is supposed to be that the robot gets saved and someone puts a Facebook VR headset on it, and then all the others have them too, and they can, I guess, do the show again in Meta's shitty virtual reality space.
What the hell is that?
Yeah, I know, nobody could figure out what the hell this was even trying to sell us about metaverse VR tech because all anyone could think of was why the fuck is Facebook interrupting the football game to make me watch a worse version of the scary part from The Brave Little Toaster.
I must confess, one more dusty road, it would be just a road too long.
Nope. Nope.
Yeah, I bet you thought I was going to get all the way out of this one without running that clip, didn't you? Now here's the one from Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Toy Story 3. Gee, yeah, no fucking idea why so many people found any of this imagery to be immediately traumatic, right?
Turn it off!
Because that's the thing, it's presentation more than concept that matters. Conceptually, the meta ad, I think, was trying to do a version of a happy ending, because this was that moment where everyone was riffing on San Junipero.
Holy shit, you did a full San Junipero in here? Oh my god, Beth, there's masturbating and then there's masturbating.
Using nostalgia people have for old animatronic robot show things as the version of old people using VR to be young and reconnect because it maybe has fewer bad things happening to human beings to get to this point implications, like showing retired or disabled old people, I guess. But the filmmaker filmmakers spent so much more effort making the grim destruction sad parts look as well rendered as they could that they forgot to consider that they crossed the line of this is a terrible image no one wants to see in a commercial, which is not the problem you want to have on top of the existing nobody wants and in fact everyone hates the metaverse problem that you're already trying to overcome. So conceptually, old nostalgia mascot gets taken out of storage and meets his friends again thanks to Facebook VR might have been maybe kinda potentially a workable but weird memorable ad concept where at worst people might have been, oh yeah, I like Chuck E. Cheese, or wait, is this about Five Nights at Freddy's if they're younger, but mostly just, oh, so they can hang out on Facebook. That's cool, I guess. Weird to do that pitch with animatronics, but I guess I also remember 80s gimmick restaurants? Nobody who watched that ad even noticed what it was about because you overrode their emotions and thought process with a prelude that just got them going, oh, damn, that's so sad. Now I'm thinking about places that closed from when I was a kid and like old toys I miss and, oh God, they're killing him. Why are they killing him? Someone stop this. Yeah, some people might have reacted like that. I bet.
That made water come out my eyes.
This is a problem film critics often point out with Michael Bay or Zack Snyder, where their movies are full of stuff that looks great as isolated cool shots and moments, but don't add up to functioning narrative or even detract from the films. The definition of the old adage that being a good editor is being ready to cut the writer or director's favorite line or scene to make the final product better. Like in Snyder's Watchmen movie, which I still think works overall, the one thing that mostly doesn't work is the fight scenes, because he keeps putting cool slow-motion speed-ramping action shots and even building whole sequences out of them, even where the point of the story and the scene is supposed to be these heroes are out-of-shape losers and jerks, and this is at best pointless and at worst counterproductive, so the look not fitting within the context throws off the storytelling. See also that part in the third Transformers movie where they have Prime shoot the bad guy in the head after he's been defeated.
You must see why I had to betray you. You didn't betray me. You betrayed yourself. No, Optimus!
Now that is a villain, one who's betrayed the heroes, gotten thousands of people killed, really evil dude, basically deserves this, but the shot just isn't the kind of shot or angle or, sick, look at the pieces fly and sparks and shit, visual motif that befits the scene itself. It's the kind of cool kill money shot you give to Jason Voorhees or the bad guys in these movies, not the hero in a scene that's meant to show him taking a grim but necessary step to end the conflict. Or if you want a more explicit but funny way to spell this concept out,
Oh my god, he's stealing all the burgers! Why, you little... I got you! Go!
It's all just an act.
Stop! Stop! He's already dead.
yeah, so the reason we all understand that classic Simpsons gag working is that we get it's all about Homer going too far and thus breaking the context. The Krusty Burglar guy is the villain of their setup. He's supposed to be the bad guy who gets caught or chased away and then it's funny, like the Hamburglar, but Homer is assuming it's real and apparently beating the guy into a bloody mess instead of whatever the comedy shenanigans were supposed to be, and it freaks the kids out. Not because they didn't understand that was the bad guy, you're supposed to want him to be stopped, but because no, don't stop him like that, that's horrifying and clearly not the right tone of action for this scenario.
Krusty the Clown, everybody.
Please look at my medical bracelet. Oh.
So the way this applies to the Apple ad is, well, it's all in the aesthetics, just like in the Bay and Snyder and Homer examples. The problem isn't that these things aren't well shot, composed, lit, etc., it's that everything is to a point of maximum extremity, and thus there's no meaning to it. All the colors pop, all the lighting is dynamic, all the contrast is high and glossy, everything is looking like its own best version, instead of using different levels of texture to focus and pull attention on a narrative path. The machine looks sterile and imposing because it is. All the knickknacks look inviting and homey and decorative because they were literally designed to do that as art objects. They're not just piled up, they're arranged, so already the storytelling is confusing and off, probably unintentionally. It doesn't say, here's a bunch of old stuff. It says, why is what looks like a museum display inside an industrial press? And then we get the crushing itself. Again, visuals have meaning in or out of context, whether you want them to or not. If you're showing something breaking under pressure, any amount of resistance is going to read as something fighting back, even from an inanimate object, and if it's a familiar or nice-looking object, people's first instinct is to project personification of some form onto it and root for it.
Linguo! Dead?
Linguo is dead.
So things like the piano, the arcade machine, the books, the guitar buckling before they give out get read as trying not to be destroyed in subliminal context. The snapping and twisting pieces on the metronome, the trumpet, the guitar, the desk lamp. Holy shit, that looks like the Pixar lamp. Was no one watching this at the design phase? They start to read like bones and muscles snapping because, again, unintended visual subtext. And it doesn't help having all the paint splattering and running out of everything like it's bleeding. It's impossible for it not to look like that. And then you've got the stuff that doesn't need help being identified with by viewers. The Angry Bird has a face. The artist model and the sculpture are people-shaped and crush like people would. This animated little cartoon on the TV literally screams for its life before it explodes. The arcade screen flips to game over before it shorts out like it's dying. The emoji balls roll away like they're trying to escape from this, and the one that almost does gets caught and its eyes pop out. So pretty much every decision you could make to not only beautify and endear these objects to the audience, the warm, cozy autumnal display lighting on the stuff, the soft music, the multi-generational nostalgia aesthetic, everything being tidy and well-arranged, the choice of items in contrast to the surroundings, but also to induce the audience to project personification onto them by picking stuff with faces, familiarity, shapes that would mimic or outright be representative of the human form, were made, and then you destroyed it in the way that could only possibly look like you were not only crushing but killing things, with the payoff being, yeah, all that symbolic slaughter we just did, here's the result of it, give us money so you can have a flat corpse. See, it's that implied subtextual violence that you get from making the maiming and destruction the visual focus because it looks so cool and photographs well that does this whole thing in. Nobody wants to buy Apple-branded cultural roadkill. You know, I feel like if you started out with all of the stuff looking kind of like dusty and underlit, maybe not as well kept, not turned on under good lighting certainly, maybe with some cobwebs or whatever used to imply that it's old and not very useful, and then instead of crushing it, you did like that stage magician switch where it just disappears instead of actually getting crushed, and ta-da, here's the iPad, you know, people would have gotten much less upset. And if they're less upset, they're not thinking about all the other questions that this raises, like, actually, you know, some of those things being crushed down aren't actually well replicated by an iPad. And not just the musical instruments and the art equipment and the furniture that famously need a tactile component. Like, iPad speakers kind of suck, right? Like, historically, that's a thing that's always been a thing, and Apple is infamously annoying about proprietary sound equipment, so what on the App Store is that record player getting replaced by? Angry Birds is already a game you can play on iPad, so what good was crushing the Angry Bird toy? It was based on that game back into the iPad. What's it gonna do? The game and the toy do different things. Same as those emoji balls. Every tablet already uses emojis. But like a kid can't squeeze or hug or toss around an iPad like a ball. I've seen kids try. All it does is make the iPad more expensive to replace.
I can't sleep without my Reggie Rabbit.
Well, here's a scouring pad. It's just as good.
It's cold and hurty.
Nobody would have been thinking about any of that then, but they are now. And you know what this reminds me of more than anything? Your father's Oldsmobile. Not your actual father's Oldsmobile, if in fact he had one, at which point for a lot of you that would mean it was vintage and maybe worth some actual money, but okay, I'll explain. So Oldsmobile was this very long-lived, reliable American car brand that made overall some very solid, generally great-looking cars that for the most part, particularly under the Cutlass brand, were marketed as almost luxury, big-size comfort cars. This ride you got on your way up through the big leagues on the way to a Cadillac, basically. I gotta stop there. If I talk too much about old cars, this will be an even sadder show. Anyway, as they went into the 80s, they kind of landed in an even bigger problem than the rest of the American auto business in that, well, it was the name. You can see the obvious problem. Oldsmobiles at a certain point went from being good and not that expensive, hey nice car to the car that only retired dads drive, literally old people mobiles, and it was right there in the name. So the company made this huge revamp decision to change their whole image around both a redesign of the 88-89 Cutlass, but also an aggressive ad campaign where old celebrities and their younger adult children would pitch the cars to a bold, new, catchy slogan billed with the line, "It's not your father's Oldsmobile."
1990. The new generation comes of age. The Oldsmobile Silhouette. The exciting new Cutlass Supreme Convertible. The totally new Cutlass Supreme 40. The new 88 Royale. The new long look of the Tornado Trofeo.
This is not your father's Oldsmobile.
And this campaign was everywhere. TV, magazines, billboards, just saturating. You couldn't turn around without seeing Not Your Father's Oldsmobile. Like if you hear today people call things Not Your Father's something in an ad or in a campaign or a movie trailer, this is what they're referencing.
I'm impressed.
And people fucking hated it. I mean, the cars didn't really sell either, and the writing had been on the wall for some time, but people were angry at these ads. It was a disaster. People hated the commercials, they hated the concept, they really hated the catchphrase. It was a total marketing failure. Today remembered as easily one of the worst marketing campaigns of all time in terms of how badly everyone reacted and why they were so turned off. What Oldsmobile wanted was for people to see them joining in like good sports with what had become the haha Oldsmobiles are for the olds mimetic punchline of the moment. But execution is everything, so where saying Oldsmobile is an old people car is this general statement, your father's Oldsmobile is personal. And personal hits people where they keep their emotions, their nostalgia, their memories, their sentimental associations, their reflexive urge to respond with basically, hey, wait a minute, what the hell did you just say about my father?
Leave my dad
Instead of, haha, yeah, Oldsmobile did used to be a car for lame geezers. Here's this new one that sure looks cool. The response it activated in people was, my father's Oldsmobile? I remembered my father's Oldsmobile. My father's Oldsmobile picked me up from school. My father's Oldsmobile took us to baseball practice. My father's Oldsmobile is what we rode in on vacation into the lake, and to places that aren't there anymore with the friends that I forgot that I missed. My father's Oldsmobile was summer and safety and youth. And my life when it made sense, and you're telling me there was something wrong with that, you yeah, so that campaign did not make people want to buy the new cars, and that's why you can't buy an Oldsmobile anymore, at all. Now, I don't know if Apple's thing is as bad or had the kind of reach to screw them over as badly as that, but failing to understand how emotionally attacked it'd make people feel in very much the same way, which is not the same thing as being illogical, but it doesn't matter whether it's logical or not. That's why it's called emotion. You know, failing to understand that is how you get enough regular people so viscerally upset that people like me, who were always going to have kind of a fuck you Apple take on this, and with more abstract, persistent issues with it about broader problems on the creative end of the tech sector like AI, intellectual property, and overworked employees and artist rights and so forth, being baked into the whole thing, our complaints on that get spread around and made much more a part of this conversation than they would have otherwise, because right now everyone fucking hates you for this. To the point where Samsung gets to come out with a whole clapback ad of their own making fun of yours. And literally has a shout out for how good their AI tech is in it, but nobody cared all that much about that part of it because what mattered was the aesthetics. It was a well-timed smacking around of Apple, and at that point everyone just wanted something to smack you around and say, fuck you for your terrible ad, Apple. And now look, I'm not sure I've got more of a thesis here than that. This is probably longer than I wanted it to be, and all I really wanted to do was explain why the whole thing was a whole thing for people and not just an artisan social media getting emotional about stuff, you know, talk about the aesthetics and mechanics of filmmaking end of it. And, you know, I hope people got some of that out of it. I probably just kind of rambled at a certain point, and now this is going to be good for my AdSense earnings, so there's that. You know, but I hope that there was some useful information tucked in there for you. Now, if I have a positive takeaway from what I recognize as a small issue with a lot of bleak energy, it's that I don't pretend to be someone who isn't very down on the concept of people, generally. I think any hope I might have had to be someone who thinks positively about the people as opposed to some of the persons sometimes basically died hard in 2016 and probably ain't coming back after COVID. Seeing enough people actually turn against something like this for the right reasons actually made me feel something a little bit like hopeful. That enough people looked at the general theme of this on top of the maybe not unintended metaphors and said, that's grotesque. We don't want this. We don't want nice things and real art and real artists and physical niceties replaced by flat, impersonal convenience regardless of how you frame the concept of it. Feels like maybe people aren't just going to let the apples and the whole rest of the very grim, inhuman, anti-creative place that the tech world has become steamroll over everything. Which isn't much, but it's something. I'm Bob, And that's the big picture.